After my wife's funeral, my son stood beside her casket and said, "I buried Mom, but I'm still bearing my childhood." He didn't cry. He didn't even look at me. Just those words, and then he walked away. That was the first sentence he had spoken to me in nearly 8 years. I thought I had done everything right, provided a home, paid for college, never missed a single tuition bill. But apparently, I had missed everything else that mattered. Grief has a way of slowing time. I stayed back after the service, surrounded by leftover roses and hollow condolences, and I remembered the 6th grade play I missed, the scraped knee I didn't kiss, the nights he waited with his baseball glove, alone. I used to think my work kept our family afloat. Now, I see it sank something more fragile. My son's trust. I'm not telling you this to earn sympathy. I'm telling you because I've learned something too late. That children don't remember how much you earned. They remember how present you were. If you're still lucky enough to have someone who waits for you to show up, don't waste it like I did. You may lose more than a child's smile. You may lose the right to ever see it again. Stick with me. This isn't just a story about regret. It's about whether redemption can come, even after silence. The church was nearly empty by the time I walked up to her casket. The flowers were beginning to wilt, the scent of lilies mingling with the cold, sterile air. My wife had always hated lilies. She once said they smelled like endings. I had forgotten that. I suppose I had forgotten many things. I stood alone. No one dared approach. Maybe it was the suit I wore too stiffly, or the way I looked like a statue, carved from regret. But mostly, I think they stayed away because everyone knew what I hadn't been, especially to the man now, approaching with a jaw clenched too tight. Michael walked toward me like he had somewhere better to be. 38 years old, taller than I remembered, but the same eyes, his mother's eyes. They used to light up when he saw me coming home. That light had long gone out. He didn't say hello. He didn't shake my hand. He didn't even pause. He looked down at the casket, then glanced at me. And with a voice so level it cut, he said, "I buried Mom, but I'm still burying my childhood." Then he turned and walked away. That was it. No hug, no tear, no acknowledgement of my grief or his. Just that sentence. Heavy, precise, and final. My hands trembled against the pew, and for a brief moment, I forgot how to breathe. After the service, I lingered, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know where else to be. The silence was louder than any eulogy. I sat down in the second row, where she always liked to sit, and let the weight of the moment crack something open inside me. He used to sit right next to her, swinging his little legs, whispering questions during the sermon. She would smile and hush him, her hand resting gently on his back. I used to think those moments were trivial. Now, they seemed like everything I had missed. I closed my eyes and let the past crawl back in. There was that one night, the night I signed the largest contract of my career. My phone buzzed endlessly during dinner, but I ignored it. I was in celebration mode, uncorking champagne while my wife's face turned pale. When I finally answered, the school principal's voice was cold. "You missed the parent meeting. Again?" Michael waited for you in the hallway until they locked the building. He was 10. He had stood there for hours with his project in hand. Why my dad is my hero. Hoping I would walk through those doors? I never saw that project. When I got home that night, he was already asleep, or pretending to be. My wife sat in the kitchen, her expression unreadable. "He cried," she said quietly. Then he said maybe his hero had the wrong address. I laughed it off, said I'd make it up to him. I bought him a new tablet the next day. He didn't touch it. It wasn't just one night. It was birthdays postponed, games missed, promises broken by meetings and flights, and just one more deal excuses. And every time I brushed it off with a check or a gadget, thinking I was fixing it. But you can't fix absence with things. Presence is the only currency children understand. And I had been bankrupt in that department for years. Back then, I convinced myself that he would grow out of it, that kids forget, that they don't hold grudges, that love covers everything. But it wasn't a grudge. It was a fracture. One I caused. One I never bothered to examine until it stared me down at my wife's funeral. She used to tell me, "He needs you to talk to him, not just pay for him." I thought she was exaggerating. After all, we were providing. We had a good home, private school, vacations. I thought I was doing it right. She never stopped trying to bridge the gap between us. Whenever he recoiled from my questions or gave one-word answers, she filled in the blanks. She softened my sharp edges, translated my silences, and excused my lateness with kind lies. Now she was gone, and there was no one left to translate. I stood beside the casket for a long time, my hand resting on the wood, not praying, just trying to remember the last time Michael had smiled at me. I couldn't. She had always believed he would come around. But as I watched him drive away without a backward glance, I felt something final settle in my chest. Maybe he never would. Michael never said it outright, but I knew. I wasn't welcome. Even after all these years, I kept sending birthday gifts. Not extravagant ones, just things I thought he might appreciate. A leather-bound journal when he turned 30. A rare vinyl record he once mentioned when he was 16. A signed first edition of the book his college thesis was based on. And later, toys for a grandson I had only seen once in a photo, emailed to me by mistake. Every package was delivered. None were ever acknowledged. I told myself that maybe he was just busy. That maybe he didn't know how to respond. I told myself a lot of things. The truth was, silence is an answer too. I remember the one time I drove to his house thinking I'd surprise him. It was a Saturday. The lawn was perfectly trimmed, bicycles leaned against the garage, and laughter floated from the backyard. I rang the bell. His wife answered, polite but firm. "Michael's not home," she said quickly. "He's at the store." She didn't invite me in. She didn't offer to call him. She smiled, as if that alone would soften the rejection. I stood there for a moment too long, pretending to believe her. Then I left the gift on the porch and walked away. It was a model spaceship, the same one we never finished when he was 9. Back home, I poured a glass of scotch and sat in the study, surrounded by things I had collected over the years. Degrees, awards, photographs from galas and conferences. They meant less now. When I couldn't sleep, I wandered into the attic. It smelled of dust and cedar. I hadn't been up there in years, not since before my wife got sick. There were boxes labeled with birthdays, holidays, old taxes. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a photo album, maybe a ghost. What I found was a small wooden chest I didn't recognize. Inside, neatly stacked and tied with a blue ribbon, were letters. Dozens of them. My handwriting. My letters. I pulled one out and read, "Hey buddy, sorry I missed your piano recital. The client dinner ran late, but your mom told me you were amazing. I'll make it up to you. Promise." Another, "I know I said I'd be back before Friday, but the Tokyo flight got extended. Open the gift early. Hope the science fair goes well. And another, I'm proud of you. Even if I'm not always there to say it in person. Each one hit like a hammer to the chest. I had written those letters. I remember sealing the envelopes, scribbling his name in block letters. But I also remember assuming they were mailed. She never sent them. At first, I was angry. Angry at her for keeping them. For deciding he didn't need to see those words. For robbing me of the one thing I thought I had done right. Trying, at least in writing, to be present. But as I sat there, surrounded by the echoes of my own neglect, the anger gave way to something else. Clarity. She hadn't done it out of malice. She had done it to protect him. To protect me. To protect whatever image of me she thought he still needed. She used to say, "Don't let him see you fail him again." Maybe the letters were her way of holding that line. But in shielding him from my inconsistencies, she had also shielded him from my intentions. He never knew I wanted to be there. That I hated every trip I had to take during his birthday week. That I stayed up at night, replaying the look on his face when I said, "Next time, buddy." He only knew that I wasn't there. He never got the, "I'm sorry." He only got the absence. And suddenly it made sense. The coldness, the shut door, the words at the funeral. He wasn't burying just a childhood. He was burying the version of me I never fought hard enough to become. The letter took 3 days to write. I rewrote it 7 times. Each draft thinner, humbler, quieter. It was harder than any speech I ever gave to investors. Harder than any contract I'd negotiated in 35 years. In the end, I wrote only what was true. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope to be seen for who I am now, not just who I wasn't then. I'm sorry for the things I missed, and for not realizing soon enough what mattered. I signed it Dad, even though I wasn't sure that title belonged to me anymore. I mailed it on a Monday. By Friday, nothing. A week passed, then 2. No message, no returned envelope, just silence. Then came the call from Elaine, Michael's wife. He's in the hospital, torn rotator cuff, minor surgery, outpatient. I thought you should know. She didn't say more, just the facts. It wasn't an invitation. It was a courtesy. Still, I went. I brought magazines, fruit, the crossword he used to like. My hand shook as I signed in at reception. The nurse pointed me to room 213. Michael sat in bed, pale but alert, his left arm in a sling. Elaine stood beside him, surprised to see me. Michael turned his head, saw me in the doorway, and immediately looked away. "I heard," I said quietly. "I thought I'd stop by." He didn't respond, just stared at the window, jaw clenched. "I won't stay long," I added, placing the small basket on the table. He finally turned. "Where were you when I broke my arm at 12? He said, eyes hard. "Do you remember that?" I didn't. "You were in Denver. I was home with Mom. She had to carry me down the stairs by herself. You sent flowers. From a hotel." My mouth opened, but no words came. "Stay away," he said. "Don't rewrite the past, just because you regret it now." I nodded, throat tight. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." I walked out of the room before the nurse saw me cry. The pain sat heavy in my chest for days. It was worse than guilt. It was impotence. The realization that no matter how much you change, some doors don't reopen. I took long walks after that. Through neighborhoods I used to speed past on my commute. One afternoon, I wandered into an old bookstore, more out of habit than interest. That's where I saw him, Jeremy Collins, Michael's best friend from middle school. I hadn't seen him in decades. He recognized me instantly. Mr. Bishop? He said, blinking. Wow, it's been years. We talked. Small things at first, weather, family, jobs. Then I asked cautiously, did Michael ever talk about me back then? Jeremy hesitated. Not much, but he didn't need to. We all knew. Knew what? That he hated being at home. Not because of you exactly. Just the emptiness. I frowned. Emptiness? Jeremy leaned in. There was this time, 8th grade. He got beat up after school. Same kid had been picking on him for weeks. We tried to help, but Michael wouldn't tell anyone. Said he didn't want to bother his mom. Said his dad was too busy. My heart sank. He came to school the next day with a black eye and said he fell off his bike, Jeremy continued. But he never rode a bike. I remembered that black eye. I remembered asking him what happened. He said, just clumsy. I left it at that. He just wanted someone to see him, Jeremy said quietly. Not fix it. Just sit next to him and say, you're not alone. The weight of those words crushed me. He didn't need gifts. He didn't need explanations. He needed a chair beside his bed, a hand on his shoulder, a voice that said, I see you. I'm proud of you. I had been so obsessed with being a provider, I forgot to be present. No letter could change that. No fruit basket could erase the ache of that hospital bed at 12. But maybe something else still could. I wasn't sure what I was doing when I walked into the community center. It smelled faintly of turpentine and dust, and the room buzzed with quiet chatter and the occasional scrape of a stool against the floor. A dozen easels stood in a loose semicircle. Sunlight pooled across the hardwood through high windows, casting long, slanted beams over brushes, rags, and jars of murky water. I hadn't held a paintbrush since college. Not seriously. Michael, though, he used to draw for hours. He had a little blue sketchbook with a superhero he invented, Sky Lion. His cape was made of clouds. I told myself this class wasn't about getting him back. It was about learning something he loved, about stepping into his world, even if he never invited me. The instructor, a soft-spoken woman named June, handed me a starter kit and pointed me toward an empty easel. My first canvas was terrible. The perspective was off, the shadows all wrong. But something about the act of painting slowed my thoughts in a way nothing else had. It demanded attention, patience, presence. I went back every Tuesday. By the 3rd week, I had painted a simple scene. A boy and his father in a park flying a kite. It wasn't subtle, but it was sincere. I mailed it to Michael's address without a note. Just the painting, carefully wrapped and signed in the corner. A.B. A week passed. Then one night, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thanks. He liked it. That was all. But it was more than I'd received in years. I stared at those 4 words until the screen dimmed. Then I whispered them aloud, just to feel them in the room. I didn't reply. I didn't want to scare it away. Instead, I opened a bottle of wine and went searching for something else I hadn't touched in a long time. The trunk at the back of our bedroom closet. It was heavy, cedar, with brass corners dulled by age. Inside were blankets, old Christmas cards, and at the bottom, a stack of journals, my wife's. I hadn't read them after she passed. It felt invasive. But something pulled me toward them now. I opened one at random, pages dated 15 years ago. Michael's quiet again. He barely speaks at dinner. Arthur says he'll grow out of it. I think he's growing around something. I flipped forward. Arthur cried tonight. He thought I was asleep, but I saw him through the bathroom door. He had a photo of Michael's 5th birthday in his hands. He kept saying, "I missed it." Over and over. I sat down on the floor. Another entry. Michael heard him that night. He stood outside the door, listening. Later, he told me, "Dad was fake crying. It broke my heart. He's so afraid of being let down again, he can't even trust tears." I closed the journal, my hands trembling. He had seen me, at my lowest, and he hadn't believed it was real. All this time, he thought I never felt anything, that I just moved on, unbothered, untouched, that every absence was intentional, every silence uncaring. He never knew how often I cried in silence, how many meetings I faked my way through with a hollow chest, how many flights I boarded thinking maybe, just maybe, I could make it back in time to see him sleep. I failed him in action, yes, but I also failed him in vulnerability. I hid too well. I protected my pride more than his heart. He needed to see me break. And when he finally did, he thought it was theater. That truth cut deeper than all the others. But it also gave me something unexpected: hope. If misunderstanding had built this wall between us, maybe truth could chip away at it. Not with grand gestures, but with the smallest door left slightly open. I hadn't planned on going to Michael's house that day. It wasn't marked on a calendar. There was no anniversary or occasion, just a quiet Tuesday when the weight of regret became heavier than the fear of rejection. I drove without thinking, without calling, the painting I had worked on for weeks, wrapped carefully in brown paper, tucked in the passenger seat. It was a watercolor this time, simpler, softer. A grandfather and his grandson sitting beneath a tree, reading. No words, just quiet togetherness. When I reached the house, I sat in the car for a long time, engine off, listening to the ticking of the cooling hood. The front lawn was green and neatly trimmed. The same swing set still stood, sun-bleached now, creaking gently in the wind. I rang the doorbell before I could talk myself out of it. The door opened. It wasn't Michael. It was Theo, my grandson. He looked up at me with wide brown eyes and said, "Your grandpa, right?" My throat closed. I nodded. He smiled and stepped aside without hesitation. That smile, so open, so free of history, shattered something in me. I stepped into the hallway just as Michael appeared from the kitchen. He froze when he saw me. His jaw clenched instantly. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice sharp. I held out the package. I painted something. For Theo. He didn't look at it. I didn't ask for anything. "I know," I said. But he did. That was when Theo wrapped his arms around my waist. Just like that. No warning. No permission. He just hugged me. I dropped to my knees and held him. Too tightly, probably. My eyes burned. My chest cracked open. "I missed a lot," I whispered. "But I don't want to miss this." Michael walked over, grabbed the package from the floor, tore the wrapping, glanced at the painting, then without a word, marched down the hall and returned with a cardboard box. It was taped shut, dented at the corners. He opened the door and hurled it onto the porch. Inside were years of returned gifts. Books, toys, letters, drawings, all unopened. "You think you can cry your way back into my life," he shouted. "You don't get to do this." I stood, slowly, holding Theo's hand. "I'm not trying to erase the past," I said. "Just trying to show you who I am now." Michael stepped forward, fists at his sides. "You only love the idea of being a father," he snapped, "not the job itself." That hit deeper than anything else. I didn't answer. What could I say? He slammed the door behind me as I walked out. I sat on the steps, not moving, watching the cardboard box settle into the shadows of the porch. 10 minutes passed. Then a small voice behind the door asked, "Can I come out?" The door cracked open. Theo slipped through, barefoot, clutching something to his chest. The torn watercolor painting. The one Michael had crumpled and thrown aside. He sat next to me, carefully flattening the creases on his lap. "Why did Daddy break your heart?" he asked. The question hung in the air, like a bell still ringing. I swallowed. "Sometimes people don't know how to fix what's broken," I said gently. "So they keep breaking it, hoping it'll make the pain go away." He looked at me. "Did you break Daddy's heart?" "I think I did," I whispered. "A long time ago." Theo was quiet for a while, then said, "He said you forgot his birthday when he was little." "I did." "But you remember mine." I nodded. "I always will." He picked up the box beside me, lifted the lid, and rummaged through the contents. Then he held up a toy airplane, still in its plastic. The price tag was faded. The wings had yellowed slightly. "I like this one," he said simply. The door opened again. Michael stood there, watching us. His face was unreadable. Theo held up the airplane. "Can I keep this?" Michael didn't answer for a long moment. Then he nodded once. I stood slowly, brushing off my knees. "I'll go," I said. "I didn't come here to force anything." He looked at the painting in Theo's hands. "You painted that?" "Yes." He nodded again, slowly this time. Theo looked between us. "Will you stay for lunch?" Neither of us spoke. Then finally Michael said, "Theo, go wash your hands." Theo scampered inside. Michael held the door. "I can't promise anything," he said. "I'm not asking for promises." He looked tired, worn down, not just by me, but by the years we'd both lost. "Next time," he said, "just call first." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. But it was a beginning. I stopped trying to make up for the past. Somewhere between grief and guilt, I found something quieter. Acceptance. I didn't win Michael back with one moment or even one conversation. The truth is, I hadn't won anything, but I had shown up. And sometimes that had to be enough. The Tuesday painting classes continued. I started bringing extra supplies, then offering tips to beginners. Eventually, June asked if I'd help lead a small group at the community center. I said yes before I even thought about it. By spring, I was running a weekly free art club for kids without parents. I brought cookies I learned to bake from a recipe tucked in my late wife's journal. The room would fill with chatter, spills, smudged faces, and bursts of color. It was chaos. It was life. I posted pictures sometimes of the paintings, the kids holding up their messy canvases like trophies. Nothing personal, just moments. Michael never liked or commented, but I could see his name in the viewer list. That was enough. I didn't press. I didn't show up at his door again. I didn't text Theo, even when I missed him. Instead, I poured myself into what I had now, the present. It wasn't loud or grand. It was subtle, steady. On Sundays, I volunteered at a senior center, sketching portraits of residents who hadn't had visitors in weeks. They'd sit proudly, faces softening as I captured the lines of their lives. I sent the portraits home with them in little cardboard frames. One of the nurses said, "You have a way of making people feel seen." I thought of Michael at 12, standing with a black eye and no one to ask the right questions. I wished I'd had that gift then, but I had it now. And that had to count for something. Then one afternoon, while watering the tomato plants I'd stubbornly grown from seed, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "If you're free, dinner at 7. Just us." 7 words. That was it. I stood there, staring at the screen, as the hose overflowed the pot and soaked my shoes. No punctuation, no emojis. Just a line carved from hesitation and hope. I didn't reply right away. I changed my shirt, brushed the dirt from under my nails, and sat down in the kitchen. The clock read 5:12. I waited 10 minutes, then replied, "I'll be there." At 6:55, I parked on the same street I once stood on as a stranger. This time, I brought nothing. No painting, no gift, just me. He opened the door. No tie, no tension. He looked like a man still learning how to breathe in the same room as his past. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The table was already set. 2 plates, bread in the middle, a roast in the oven. He poured us both a glass of wine. We clinked glasses quietly, not for a toast, but to mark the moment. We talked about small things at first. Theo's school, Elaine's job, my tomatoes, the club at the center. Then there was a lull, a silence that didn't sting. He looked at me and said, "You seem different." "I stopped trying to fix everything," I replied. "Started just being." He nodded. Another pause. Then softly, he added, "Theo still sleeps with that airplane you gave him." My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. "That makes me happy," I said. "I used to think you didn't care," he continued, "that you were just absent." "I was," I admitted. "But now," he said, "I don't know. Maybe I wasn't ready to believe anything else." We didn't need to say more. There was no declaration of forgiveness, no hug, no tears, just 2 men, once father and son, now something tentative and possible, sharing a meal in the quiet space between who they were and who they still might become. When I left that night, he walked me to the door. "Same time next week?" he asked. I smiled. "If you're cooking." He smirked. "I'll order in." I walked to my car, under a sky full of stars I hadn't noticed on the drive in. I didn't know where we were headed, but for the first time in a long, long while, we were heading there together.